So what we want to do today is brief you on home base and really have you walk away with three understandings about the program. Number one, why this program, why we decided to do it, what's the data that drove this program. Two, how does it operate, how does it function? And then three, what are the goals that we have for the program, including what metrics do we have to date in the 4 or 5 months that it's been up and running. So let's start a little bit about why this program. I don't think anyone can dispute that the best way to end homelessness is to stop it from happening in the first place. This is a homeless prevention program. Gordon gave the statistics about the number of our community members who live on the street every day, which we all agree is not acceptable. So first we have to stop the bleeding. We have to stop the increase of people who are living without shelter. And so this is a prevention program. Second, you have to understand the nexus between eviction and homelessness. This program arose out of a study, and I am gonna go off base a little bit. This arose out of a study that was published about 18 months ago, 20 months ago, by the King County Bar Association, which is a group of lawyers in the county, a volunteer association, and the Seattle Women's Commission. And they published a report that identified the nexus between evictions and homelessness. And this is not unique to King County. This is a nationwide problem. Some regions like New York are addressing it. Seattle had not until this program. But a couple of statistics that stood out to me when I heard about the report and read it. Number one, 87% of evictions were for late rent. 80% of people who are evicted are homeless within 4 months. 80% of people who are evicted are homeless within 4 months, with an average amount due that triggers that eviction of $1,200. Now, I don't know the statistic, Lauren I know does, of how much it costs to rehouse, to re-shelter somebody who becomes homeless. I guarantee you it's a factor of 10 to 20 of $1,200. So it seemed to us a no-brainer to invest up front the $1,200 to keep somebody sheltered instead of doing it on the back end after they became homeless. Here's another important statistic. There's a disparate impact on people of color. In our county, about 1/3 of our people are of color. 52% of our homeless population are people of color. And this statistic generally holds true in the eviction process. About half of the evictions in King County are of people and families of color. So there's a disparate impact that we need to address, and we believe this program will go a long ways towards doing that. Evictions are often caused by one-time crises. A medical emergency prevents somebody from going to work. Temporary loss of job because of layoff. You can go through the laundry list of reasons why that happens. Joda is an individual who we were able to help, we being United Way, before this program actually launched through our other programs. But his situation is a perfect example of what this program is designed to address. Joda lived in his apartment for many, many, many years. He had a medical emergency that kept him out of work for 6 months. Living paycheck to paycheck, unable to work for 6 months, he received an eviction notice. He had the financial means to continue to pay the rent, but for that one-time crises. He and many people like him faced that same sort of situation that caused the eviction. We've helped teachers. We have a teacher who we've helped through home base, living paycheck to paycheck, that had one-time emergency. We had a gentleman who moved from the Midwest to Seattle to be with his teenage son. He wanted to be a father to his teenage son who was living with his mother out here. He came out here at a job as a delivery driver, a stable job, until one day he showed up at work and he and his colleagues received a layoff notice. Again, living paycheck to paycheck, he missed a rent payment. He received an eviction notice. He was about to have no shelter. Home base helped him. by giving him grants to make up the late rent so he could stay in his apartment and prevent eviction. So how does this thing work, right? So we know why we did it. We know the nexus between eviction and homelessness. So what are we doing to address it? Homebase puts together 2 existing programs that have been around for quite a while. First, the King County Bar Association, which I've been affiliated with for many, many years, has for over a decade have had a housing justice project. The Housing Justice Project helps, among others, people who are facing eviction. It's a pro bono legal clinic that is set up in the 2 King County courthouses where evictions occur. Downtown, just 3 blocks from here, and then in the King County courthouse as well. They have lawyers on site who help people facing evictions. They can come into the office, they can sit down with a lawyer, and the lawyer can help them navigate through this very complicated legal system. The problem is they had no funds, right? They can talk with somebody about their problems. They can talk with them about their alternatives. If it's a wrongful eviction, they can help them in the legal system, but they can't help them make up their rent. The United Way has a program called Streets to Home. Streets to Home offers flexible grant making to individuals who are already without shelter. What this program does is it marries those 2 programs so that instead of putting the funding towards people who are already homeless, we do it on the front end to prevent homelessness in the first place. So let me tell you how it works in real life. Somebody gets a 3-day notice to pay rent or be evicted. They don't have the funds, right? Take the school teacher who had the emergency and couldn't pay the rent, but has a job. She goes into the King County Courthouse here in Seattle. She's able to meet with a lawyer sitting at a desk, a lawyer and a social worker who is able to evaluate the situation. Part of that evaluation is whether or not the grant making will, in the long term, make a difference. What we don't want to do is put Band-Aids on problems. In the case of a teacher, she's got a job, she needs $1,200, $1,237, the average amount of rent. She will receive the grant so she can prevent eviction and have a fresh start with her landlord. The grant goes directly to the landlord. It doesn't go to the individual. We are tracking these situations to make sure it's not reoccurring, to make sure that we're being effective in how the program works. We also recognize that there are situations in which somebody has a more systemic, long-term problem that needs to be addressed, and a one-time payment to prevent eviction will not work. We would likely see that person back in 30 days facing eviction again. We are not going to make those a grant in those circumstances, but instead, because we have a social worker working with a lawyer, we are able to offer other solutions. We are able to get that family into the system of the United Way, provide whatever services are necessary to prevent homelessness, even if it's not staying in their existing shelter. The other thing we're doing in that circumstance, if we can't save a tenancy, is we're trying to prevent a judgment of eviction. Just like a bankruptcy is a stain on your credit and makes it very difficult to get credit in the future, an eviction judgment makes it very difficult to rent in the future. So we don't want to have that black mark on these individuals' credit report and history. So we're trying to reach agreements with the landlord to dismiss the eviction in exchange with an agreement to voluntarily move out, and then we can provide that family with services to keep them sheltered, even if not in that tenancy. So that's how it operates. We've only been up and running 4 months. Lauren will go into some more details on that. We will continue to massage the program to make sure it works. But I think the key here is that we have 2 established programs that by design we are coordinating and marrying together that we think will make a real difference in our community. I think we're doing Q&A at the end, so I will leave it at that. But I guess I want to end with saying on behalf of the Seattle Mariners, we are delighted to be part of this program. We take our position in the community very, very seriously. We are community leaders. We want to address this problem head on. And we also couldn't be more delighted to have companies like Microsoft, Costco, and others join what we think is the right place to put funds to try to end this crisis. Homelessness is a very complicated problem. We all read about the causes, be it addiction or mental health issues. There is no one solution to homelessness, but every person who is homeless has a solution. And what we need to do is develop as many tools in our toolbox to provide solutions to each of these individuals.
My name is Lauren McGowan. I'm the Senior Director of Ending Homelessness here at United Way. Caesar is one of our newest colleagues, and he right away saw the power and impact of this program. I've had the fortune to work at United Way for about 15 years. And during that time, I've seen our homelessness crisis escalate. I've seen more people of color falling into homelessness. And I've had a growing concern about what we as a community can do to solve this crisis. But nothing has made me more proud than as we've developed this home-based program. It was about this time last year that Fred came to us and said, you know, this report is really clear that evictions are a leading cause of homelessness. We know that the work that the King County Bar Association does is good. What if we scaled it up and helped team it with the Streets to Home program? And that can only happen in a community like this, where we see a problem, we identify a solution, and then very quickly raise the money to put those dollars into action and launch a program. This time last year we met, we started designing, we launched the program in April, so we're about 6 months in. And as a community, we have raised over $9.7 million for this program. That's amazing. And that shows what happens when we all come together. Catalytic leadership from Fred and the Mariners, many other corporate partners in this room coming together to say, it's not okay that our neighbors are experiencing homelessness. And if we can prevent them from falling into that crisis, falling into the trauma that is homelessness, then we're going to be a better and stronger community. So Fred talked a little bit about the overall impact of the program. I'm going to give you a few more details about what it looks like on the ground. So as you heard, we operate out of 2 courthouses. Here in Seattle, we are working with Wellspring Family Services. They are acting as the social workers on site there. And then down in Kent, we work with the Urban League of Metropolitan Seattle. Together with the King County Bar Association and United Way, those 4 partners come together regularly to really continue to think about what we do to continue to scale this program, make sure that it's doing what's intended, and that we are really attacking the racial disparities that persist in homelessness head on. So who qualifies? First, you have to have been served an eviction. You have to have some proof of income. As Fred was saying, it's really important that we're helping people who can maintain their housing going forward. And we must be able to save the tenancy or extend it for at least 30 days. So we're really trying to make sure that if for some reason somebody isn't able to stay in their home long term, we can keep them in there for at least 30 days while the team has time to work with them to think about other alternative housing situations. And that might be moving into lower cost housing, getting doubled up with friends or family, looking at other rental subsidies that exist, really thinking about how we weave together our homelessness system to best meet the needs of that family. So how it works, we really take this case by case, listening to what is going on in that household, understanding why they've fallen into having some back debt as it is, and understanding what it's going to take to get them out. The funds are really flexible. They can pay for past rent, utilities, late fees, court fees, or attorney fees, and they're paid directly to the landlord or the property owner. So the agency will do an assessment, work with that family, and then make that payment so that we make sure it happens really quickly, and that we start to understand who those landlords and property owners are, and can start to build a system with them to understand, are there better ways? Can we get to this before you ever get to eviction? How do we start to think about what would it take to go even further upstream? And so we're building this big database of who these landlords and property owners are, whether they be public housing authorities like the Seattle or King County Housing Authority, smaller mom and pop landlords or property owners, and really having conversations with them both about what supports they need, what policy changes we can look at together at a state or local level, and most importantly, how we can support families. So, this is so exciting, right? So we launched in April, and in the first 6 months of the program, we have prevented 414 households from being evicted. That is a 400% increase over the same time last year. 400%. So our biggest learning is that when we increase the capacity of legal services and add in these flexible financial dollars, it works. And that's hundreds of households, thousands of individuals who are better off. There were about some families who, they're not going to be able to either avoid eviction or stay in that house for that household over the long term. There were about 66 of those, but we were able to extend the time that they were in house by about 43 days on average. So what that means is that gives us quite a bit of time to begin negotiating, how do we get you into lower cost housing? And that's usually what the case is. They may have had a drop in income, maybe from 2 people working to 1 or a shortage of hours. So we can start to think about what's it gonna take to either increase your income or reduce your rent. About 1,200 households overall have received legal assistance, which is a 45% increase over the same time last year. Those of you that have already invested in this program, that's what you've done. That's a really amazing thing to see. Those are households that would have ended up in our homelessness system, on our streets, and they're not because of you. And together, I'm really confident that we can do even more. We've learned a lot. Marlo Klein is my colleague who's really put a lot of the design process into this program, and we've learned so much in the last few months. One certainly is that this powerful combination of legal services and flexible financial assistance is working well. One of the surprises has been that the Kent courthouse is significantly busier than Seattle. Anybody have any guesses why? Gordon.
Lots of families in South King County.
That's right, yeah. So we have seen, we sort of should have intuitively known that, but we didn't expect the size. And in fact, when we look at both the number of people being served in Seattle versus Kent, it's significantly higher, and the size of families. So Kent has actually served about 71% of the overall people being served through the program. So it's just bigger families, more people in South King. Families are facing significant housing debt. And we knew that going in, but it has been higher than we expected. What we have seen is that oftentimes it's not just 1 month. Landlords, they often are not evicting people right away because they're trying to help a family out. So they may go a few months and they get further and further behind. So even in Fred's example of our teacher, where if it was 1 month, we could easily catch them up. Once a household is missing 1, 2, 3 months of rent, those payments sort of pile on top of each other and the late fees pile on top of each other. And so they come to us in a place of real desperation. And so we've had to adjust some of our criteria in terms of how much we spend per client in order to meet that need. But the good news is that it's still about a little over $1,400 per client, which is in line with our Streets to Home program. So it's been higher than we thought, but we're able to address that debt head on, and that family is going to be okay going forward. Last year, the Washington State Legislature passed some really important eviction reforms. And we ultimately believe that there's both a role for policy change in preventing evictions, as well as philanthropic support to help families. Those eviction reforms went into effect in July of this year. We're not very patient when it comes to ending homelessness. So we thought in August, everything would be great, and we were gonna see really quickly the effects of that legislation. And we didn't right away. So what we thought was gonna happen is we would see fewer clients and their costs would start to go down. The good news is in September, we've started to see that. What that should allow us to do is stretch our resources further. We should be able to do more outreach to get more people in the door and reduce the overall costs per individual household so we can serve even more people. And then finally, there's a really large need in our region for a coordinated shallow rental assistance program. Homelessness prevention is something that is not coordinated as a system. Oftentimes, if somebody is facing a real need, they might have to go to a church, a community-based organization, a friend or family member, just to cobble those dollars together. At the same time that they're working, at the same time they're putting their kids through school, it is stressful and it is unreliable. And so one of the things that Homebase has done has been a catalyst for conversations among philanthropy and public funders to think about how we truly build a system out in our region that prevents homelessness right on for families in need. So what's on the horizon? We are starting to see the positive impact of the landlord and tenant laws. There's going to be a lot more to learn, and as we head into January and have another legislative session, we're going to have to probably make some tweaks to some of those laws. And so, again, having those relationships with the landlord and property owners is going to be really important in thinking about what we can do together. And then later this fall, we're going to be entering into a robust evaluation process of this program. We've been collecting a lot of data and want an external evaluator to come in and look at both the overall program design and the impacts it's having on preventing homelessness. We believe this can be a program that is a national model, and we want to make sure that we are building the evidence, constantly improving, and being able to take what we're learning here in Seattle, King County, and bring it to the rest of the state and the rest of the country, because there's something special that's happening. And we know that homelessness doesn't just affect our region, it is a national problem, and this is the type of program that can really solve for it. A couple of interesting things about folks that we're seeing coming in. As I mentioned, we're seeing a lot more folks in Kent than in Seattle. One of the things that we know nationally is that homelessness among seniors and older adults is on the rise. And when we looked at the data here, about 14% of our clients are over 60. We even had 2 households that were facing eviction who are over 85. Think about that. You think about your parents and your grandparents and the lack of safety net that is there for folks. Imagine being in your 80s and facing eviction and thinking about, there's probably not much I can do to increase my income. It's probably really hard and traumatic to move or decrease my rent. Those are tough conversations. And those are things that are really important for us to help illuminate and understand what can we do as a community to really address that. About 33% of the clients coming in are disabled. Again, many of them probably have an ongoing subsidy that is helping to pay for their rent. It's probably not enough in a region like ours where the cost of housing is really, really high. So again, thinking about what do we do for that targeted population. We believe that we will not solve homelessness unless we address the racial disparities that exist. And as a community, we are doing a lot when it comes to making sure that we are investing in housing programs and providers who specifically work with people of color. We know that African Americans and Native Americans are far more likely to experience homelessness. And so we've done a lot of work to identify organizations like Chief Seattle Club and Urban League and put them in a place to serve those communities. But unless we prevent those people from becoming homeless in the first place, we're not going to solve the crisis. So we're really thrilled that as we look at these numbers of folks that have come in, about 68% of clients overall have been people of color. Now, we're not thrilled that those are the folks facing eviction, right? And we need to think about the systemic reasons that that exists and what policy changes we need to put in place and that we as a united way and as a community need to advocate for. But what we know is we're reaching them. And if we can reach people before the crisis exists, we're far more likely to solve it for them. As you can tell, this is something that in just 6 months, we as a community, the folks in this room, have had a tremendous amount of impact. And there's so much more to do. And that's why we're excited to continue elevating the results. We hope you will take some of these results and share it with your friends and family members and colleagues, because we still have to continue raising more money for this and working together to make this something that's available for anybody that is facing eviction.